Now as Christian went on his way, he came to a little hill, placed purposely so that pilgrims could have a view of what lay ahead of them. So Christian went up the hill, and from there he recognized Faithful journeying not far in front of him. Then Christian called, "Hello! Hold up! There! Wait! I will be your companion!" At that, Faithful turned around and looked. Christian called again, "Wait! Wait until I catch up with you!" But Faithful answered, "No, I'm running for my life from one who is after me." At this, Christian became determined and put all his strength into catching up. He quickly reached Faithful and even ran beyond him so that the last was first, and then he smiled proudly because he had outrun his brother. And while still gloating, however, Christian failed to watch his step, and suddenly he stumbled and fell. He was unable to get back to his feet again until Faithful came up to help him. And then I saw in my dream that they went on together in brotherly love, sharing with each other about all that had happened to them on their pilgrimages. Christian began saying, "Faithful, my brother, whom I honor and love, I'm glad that I've caught up with you and that God has so unified our spirits that we can walk as companions on this pleasant path." "Dear friend," said Faithful, "I have desired your company ever since leaving our town, but since you left ahead of me, I was forced to come much of the way alone." "How long did you stay in the city of destruction before you set out after me on your pilgrimage?" asked Christian. "Until I could stay no longer. For soon after you left, there was a great deal of talk that in a short time our city would be burned down to the ground by fire from heaven." "Really? Did your neighbors say this?" "Yes, it was in everyone's mouth for a while." "What? Didn't anyone but you come away from there to escape the danger?" "As I said, there was a great amount of talk, but I don't think they strongly believed it. For in the heat of the debate, I heard some of them speak derisively about you and your desperate journey. That is what they called your pilgrimage. But I believed, and still do, that fire and brimstone will fall from above to destroy our city. Therefore I've made my escape." "Did you hear any talk of neighbor Pliable?" "Yes, I did, Christian. I heard that he followed you until he came to the swamp of Despond, where some have said he fell in. He didn't want anyone to know this, but I'm sure that's the kind of dirt he was covered with." "And what did the neighbors say to him?" "He's been greatly ridiculed by all sorts of people since his return. People mock and despise him, and he cannot even find employment. Now he's 7 times worse off than if he'd never gone out of the city." "But why are they so much against him, since they also despise the way that he abandoned?"
"Oh, they say, hang him, he's a turncoat. He wasn't true to what he professed. I think God has stirred up enemies against him. They hiss at him and scorn him because he's abandoned the way."
"Well, were you able to talk with him at all before you left?" said Christian.
"I met him once in the streets, but he quickly looked away, and crossed to the other side, obviously feeling ashamed of what he had done, so I didn't get a chance to speak to him."
"Well," said Christian, "when I first set out I had great hopes for that man, but now I fear he will perish along with the city when it's destroyed. For it's happened to him according to the true proverb, a dog returns to its vomit, and a sow that's washed goes back to her wallowing in the mud."
"Yes, I fear this too. But who can thwart the inevitable consequences of one's own foolish choices?"
"Well, Faithful, my neighbor, let's talk about matters of more immediate concern to our own lives. Tell me about the things you've met with so far on the way. I know you've had some interesting experiences. If not, it would indeed be a marvel." "I escaped the swamp that you fell into, and I reached the gate without much danger. But I did encounter someone whose name was Wanton. She made every effort to allure and ensnare me."
"It's good you escaped her net. Joseph was severely tested by her. He escaped her like yourself, but it nearly cost him his life.
What did she do to you?"
Unless you've already met her, you cannot imagine what a seductive tongue she has. She pressured me severely to turn aside with her, promising me all kinds of pleasure and contentment."
"She didn't promise you the pleasure and contentment of a clear conscience, did she?"
"No, you know what I mean. Only the pleasure and contentment that come from gratification of carnal and fleshly desires."
"Thank God you escaped her snare. He who is under the Lord's wrath will fall into it."
"Well, I don't know if I fully escaped or not."
"But why do you say this? I trust you didn't consent to her desires."
"No, I didn't defile myself. I remembered an old writing I had seen that reads, 'She leads you down to death and hell.' And so I shut my eyes because I didn't want to be enticed by her seductive looks. She cursed at me, and then I went on my way."
"Did you meet with any other assaults as you journeyed?" asked Christian.
When I came to the foot of the hill called Difficulty, I met a very old man who asked me who I was and where I was going. I told him that I was a pilgrim on the way to the celestial city. And then he said, "You look like an honest fellow. Will you be content to live with me for the wages that I will give you?" I asked him his name and where he lived. He said his name was Adam the First, and that he lived in the town of Deceit. I then asked him what his business was and how much he would pay to work for him. He said that his work was enjoyment and that his wages would be to inherit all that he had. I questioned further, asking what his house was like and how many others were employed in his service. He told me that his house was full of all the delicacies the world could offer, and that his servants were his own children. Then I asked how many children he had. He said that he had only 3 daughters, the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the pride of life. And he suggested that I should marry them if I so desired. I asked him how long he wanted me to live with him, and he said that it would be as long as he himself lived. "Well," said Christian, "what agreement did you and the old man finally come to?" "Why, at first I found myself somewhat inclined to go with him, for I thought he spoke very sensibly. But then I looked at his forehead as I was speaking with him, and I saw written there, 'Put off concerning your former conduct the old man.'" "What happened then?" "Suddenly it came burning into my mind that no matter what he said and how he tried to entice me, I must resist him, because his intention was to sell me as a slave. I told him to stop talking to me because I would not come near his house. And then he insulted me and told me that he would send someone after me to cause bitterness to my soul as I journeyed on my way. At that I turned away from him. But just as I turned, he took hold of my flesh and gave me such a sharp jerk backwards that I thought he had pulled me apart and had part of me in his possession. This made me cry, 'What a wretched man I am!' And then I went on my way up the hill. When I had gotten about halfway up the hill, I looked behind me and saw someone coming after me, swift as the wind. He overtook me near where the arbor stands. "That's the place where I sat down to rest, but I was overcome with sleep," said Christian. "It was there that I lost my scroll." "But my good brother," continued Faithful, "hear me out. As soon as the man overtook me, after saying only one word, to my surprise, he knocked me out with cold with one blow. When I came to, I asked him why he had treated me this way. He said that it was because of my secret inclination towards Adam the First. Then he struck a powerful blow to my chest and continued to punch me. He made me stumble backwards until I again lay at his feet like one dead. When I came to again, I cried to him for mercy, but he said, 'I don't know how to show mercy.' With that he knocked me down again. He would doubtless have made an end of me had not that one come by and ordered him to stop." "Who was the one who made him stop?" asked Christian. "I didn't know him at first, but as he went by I noticed holes in his hands and his side, and then I concluded that he was our Lord. After that I went on up the hill." "The man who overpowered you was Moses. He doesn't spare anyone. He doesn't know how to show mercy to those who break his law," said Christian. "Yes, I know that very well," said Faithful. "And this wasn't the first time he has confronted me. Once he approached me while I was still living happily back home. There he threatened to burn my house down with me in it if I stayed there." "I wonder, did you see the house that stood on top of the hill, facing the side that Moses met you on?" "Yes, and the lions in front of it too. But I think they were asleep since it was about noon. Because I had so much daylight left, I passed by the gatekeeper and went on down the hill." "Yes," said Christian, "he told me that he had seen you go by. I wish you had come to the house. They would have shown you many rare and precious things that you would never forget till the day you die. But please tell me, have you met anyone else in the Valley of Humility?" "Yes," answered Faithful. "I met someone called Discontent. He tried to persuade me to go back again with him. His reason was that the valley was altogether without honor. Besides this, he told me that to go this way would offend the sensibilities of many friends, including pride and arrogance, self-conceit, worldly glory, and others who he said he knew would be very much upset with me if I were to make such a fool of myself as to wade through this valley." "Well," said Christian, "how did you answer him?" "I told him that even though all these things he had named might claim to be my friends and relatives, and it's true because some of them are my relatives according to the flesh, since I became a pilgrim, they've already disowned me, and I've also rejected them. Therefore they were no more to me than if it had ever been of my lineage. In addition, I told them that as to this valley, he had really misrepresented it, because humility comes before honor, and a haughty spirit before a fall. So I said to him, I would rather go through this valley to receive what the wise count as honor than to choose what you consider most worthy of affection. Well, did you have any other encounters in the valley? Said Christian. Yes, I met Shame, said Faithful. But of all those whom I've met on my pilgrimage, he, I believe, most bears the wrong name. After a little debate, others would have backed off. Some, but not so with this bold-faced Shame. Why, what did he say to you? What didn't he say? He objected to our faith. He said it was a pitiful, low, cowardly thing for a man to give heed to religion. He said that a tender conscience was unmanly, and that for a man to be careful of his words and deeds would tie him down and rob him of his adventurous liberty, to which the truly daring spirits of the times were accustomed. He said that such a person would be the laughing stock of our present-day society. He also objected that so few of the truly powerful, rich, or wise men and women were ever of my persuasion, and he contended that of those of my persuasion, none had ever been powerful, wealthy, or wise prior to their conversion. He thought them to be fools who would voluntarily and eagerly decide to give up all they had for who knows what. He objected also to the lowly, inferior rank and condition of those who were pilgrims. He also said that the pilgrims were ignorant, especially in their understanding of the natural sciences. He confronted me about a great many more things in addition to those I've already related. He said that it was a shame to sit whining and mourning under conviction from the message of a sermon. It seemed a shame to him to see pilgrims sighing and groaning as they returned to their homes. He thought it a shame for me to ask my neighbor for forgiveness for petty faults, or to make restitution where I've taken advantage of someone. He said that religion separates a man from those who are great because of their few vices, which he called by finer names. He said it makes him a member and friend of the lowbrows because of their common religious association. Is this not a shame? He asked. Well, what did you say to him? I hardly knew what to say at first. Indeed, he was so convincing that I felt myself blushing. I felt like his point of view had beaten me, but then I began to consider how what is highly valued among men is detestable in God's sight. And I thought again, this shame tells me man's point of view, but he tells me nothing of what God or the Word of God says. I thought, moreover, that at the day of judgment we shall not be doomed to death or presented with life according to the dictates of the lawless spirits of the world, but according to the wisdom and law of the Almighty. So I determined that what God says is best, even though all the world is against it. I realized then that God is the one who sets forward this faith of ours. I saw that God esteems a tender conscience, that those who make themselves fools for the kingdom of heaven are wisest, and that the poor man who loves Christ is far richer than the greatest man in the world who hates him. And then I commanded, Go away, Shame. You're an enemy to my salvation. Should I give heed to you against my sovereign Lord? How would I then be able to look him in the face when he comes? If I'm now ashamed of his ways and his servants, how can I expect him to bless me? But this Shame was a bold and persistent villain indeed. I could hardly shake him off. He kept haunting me and whispering in my ear about one or another weakness that goes along with religion. Finally, I told him that any further attempts to discredit the faith would be in vain, for it was in the very things he disdained that I was able to see the most glory. So at last I got past this stubborn menace, and having shaken him off, I began to sing, Oh, the hard trials that meet us all, who do obey the heavenly call. They're many and suited to the flesh, coming and coming again afresh. That now or later we by them may be taken, overcome, and fall away. So let the pilgrims, all pilgrims then, be vigilant, forsake self-like men. I'm glad, my brother, said Christian, that you so bravely withstood this villain. For like you said, of all our enemies, he seems wrongly named. He's so bold as to follow us in the streets and attempt to make us ashamed before all people. He would have us to be ashamed of all that is good. He is shame, yet if he were not so audacious, he would never attempt to do as he does. But let us keep resisting him, for in spite of all his arrogant intimidation, he exalts none other than fools. Solomon said, The wise are promoted to honor, but fools are promoted to shame. Well, said Faithful, I think we must cry for help against shame to him who would have us to be valiant for truth upon the earth. You speak the truth, said Christian. But did you meet anyone else in the valley? No, I didn't. I had sunshine all the rest of the way through it, and also through the valley of the shadow of death." "Oh, you were well off," said Christian. "It was far different from me. I had an enduring season of trial. Almost as soon as I had entered into that valley, I had a dreadful battle with that foul fiend Apollyon. Yes, I thought he was going to kill me, especially when he got me down and crushed me beneath him. It seemed he would crush me to pieces. Then he threw me, and my sword flew out of my hand. He told me his victory was certain, but this poor man cried out, and the Lord heard him and saved him out of all of his troubles. After this I entered into the valley of the shadow of death. I had no light for almost half the way through it. I thought I would be killed there over and over again. But at last the day broke, the sun rose, and I went through the rest of the way with far more peace and quiet.